The river cut through the canyon like a vein of silver, its shallow waters cool against the skin of the young Apache woman who waded into its depths. She had come there alone, fleeing the dust and noise of the camp, seeking a moment of quiet where only the rush of the current and the whisper of the canyon walls could speak to her. But as soon as she had lowered herself into the water, laying aside her garments on a rock, laughter had split the silence. Shadows darted from the brush, men she did not know. Rough settlers whose faces twisted with cruel humor. Before she could stand or shout, they had snatched her clothing, hooting like jackals as they vanished back into the wild. Their taunts lingered in the air, leaving her trembling in the shallows, clutching the water as if it could shield her. She crouched there, the feathers in her earrings dripping with the weight of river water, her dark eyes flashing with fury and shame. She was no stranger to hardship. Her people had endured raids, hunger, the endless push of outsiders into their lands. But this humiliation cut deep. To be stripped of dignity in such a way, to be left vulnerable in the canyon, it was an insult she would not forgive. Yet she could not chase them, bare, unarmed, and alone. She pressed her arms across her chest, her breath shallow, her mind racing for what to do next. It was then that the sound of hooves reached her, slow and steady, like thunder muffled by distance. She froze, sinking deeper into the water, hoping the canyon itself might hide her. The horse's steps drew closer until a figure appeared on the bank. A tall cowboy, his hat casting a shadow across his weathered face, his belt heavy with the weight of a holstered revolver. He moved with the confidence of a man who belonged anywhere his boots touched, though the rifle across his back hinted he had fought for such belonging more than once. In his hand he carried a coat, dust-colored and rough, worn from years of use. His eyes found hers instantly, though she tried to duck beneath the rippling surface. He did not laugh, nor jeer, nor smirk the way the others had. Instead, he regarded her with a stillness that carried neither threat nor pity, only a quiet understanding. "Looks like you've been wronged," he said, his voice low, steady as the earth itself. She said nothing, lips pressed tight, suspicion burning inside her. Cowboys were not to be trusted, not in her world, where they came with rifles and greed, tearing at the land and the people alike. Yet here one stood, offering no weapon, no mocking glance, only the coat in his hand. "They stole my clothes," she finally whispered, anger edging her words. "They think it is a game." Her chin lifted, defiant even in her state of exposure, for she would not show weakness before any man. The cowboy gave a small nod, as though he had expected such cruelty from the world. He crouched at the riverbank, holding out the coat. "Take this," he said simply. "No one should be left without cover in land this harsh." She studied him, eyes narrowed, searching for the trap in his kindness. But there was no hunger in his gaze, no delight in her shame. Reluctantly, she pushed through the water toward him, every step heavy with caution. He turned his head slightly, offering her the dignity of his averted eyes as she snatched the coat and wrapped it around herself. The rough fabric scratched her skin, yet it was a shield, and she clutched it with gratitude she could not voice. When she finally stood on the shore, the coat draped across her like armor. The cowboy straightened. He did not smile, only met her gaze as though weighing something unspoken. "My name's Colton," he said, after a silence that stretched long. "I reckon you've been wronged by men who know nothing of honor. If you'll allow, I'll see to it they don't trouble you again." She shook her head sharply. "I do not need saving. I need respect." Her words carried fire, but beneath them ran the tremor of truth. Alone, she could not strike back at those who had shamed her. Colton's eyes softened, though his jaw stayed firm. "Respect is earned," he replied, "but it's also defended. No one earns the right to strip it away from you." For the first time since the laughter had stolen her breath, her chest eased. She studied the man in front of her, the stranger who had come not with mockery but with a coat, her shield in the wilderness. He stood there waiting, not pressing her, not demanding trust, but offering it. She realized then that perhaps strength could come not just from the fire within, but from the hands of those rare, enough to give without taking. And in that moment she knew their paths were bound, though the world around them would never make it simple. The canyon winds carried a silence between them, broken only by the faint rustle of grass and the distant cry of a hawk. The Apache woman, still clutching the cowboy's coat to her damp skin, felt the heat of her shame giving way to another flame, anger that refused to be smothered. She had been wronged, and the image of those men laughing as they stole her clothes burned in her mind like a scar carved into stone. Colton stood steady before her, neither imposing nor retreating, waiting for her choice. She had never trusted cowboys, yet this one did not turn her pain into jest. Instead, he had given her dignity when others had stolen it, and that alone unsettled her heart. "I do not ask for your help," she said finally, her voice quiet but edged with steel, "but I will not forget what they did. I will not forgive them." Her fists tightened around the rough fabric, her dark eyes glinting with unspoken resolve. Colton nodded once, as though her words were an oath he respected. "Then we'll ride after them," he said, his tone calm but firm. "You don't need saving, but justice, that we can chase down together." Her gaze lifted sharply, surprise flickering across her face. No man had ever offered her partnership, only dominance or dismissal. For a long breath she studied him, weighing the risk. Finally she gave a single nod. "We ride," she said. Colton turned and led his horse closer. The animal, a sturdy bay with a scar across its muzzle, lowered its head as if acknowledging her. She mounted carefully, keeping the coat tight around her, while Colton swung into the saddle with practiced ease. They set off across the canyon, the river fading behind them as the trail ahead beckoned like a promise written in dust. The tracks were easy to follow, boot prints pressed deep into soft earth, careless laughter echoing faintly ahead on the wind. These men were not clever. They were drunk on their cruelty, certain no consequence would find them. The Apache woman leaned forward, her hair still wet against her cheeks, her jaw set with a determination that seemed to make the canyon itself lean closer to listen. As they rode, Colton glanced at her, his brow furrowed beneath the brim of his hat. "What's your name?" he asked quietly, respectful, as though names were not to be taken but given freely. She hesitated, then answered, "Naya." The syllables rolled off her tongue like the river's song. Colton repeated it once softly, as though marking it into memory. The trail bent through a narrow pass, the sandstone cliffs pressing close. Voices carried through the air, raucous, cruel laughter. The sound of men who believed themselves untouchable. Naya stiffened, her hands tightening against the reins. She could almost see her garments in their hands, tossed like trophies. Colton raised a hand, signaling her to slow. Together they dismounted, tying the horse to a scrub tree, and crept forward. Around the bend, the men lounged by a campfire, 3 of them, their rifles tossed carelessly on the ground. One waved her dress in the air like a banner, mocking, while the others roared with laughter. Naya's blood surged hot in her veins. She wanted to rush forward, to tear back what was hers, but Colton's hand rested lightly on her arm. "Patience," he whispered, his eyes sharp and cold. "They'll learn." He stepped into the open, his boots grinding the gravel, his revolver already drawn. The laughter died at once, replaced by startled curses. "Evening, boys," Colton said, his voice steady as stone. "You've taken something that doesn't belong to you." The men scrambled, hands reaching for their rifles, but Naya emerged beside him, her chin high, her presence a blade sharper than any steel. "That belongs to me," she said, her voice clear, strong, and echoing against the canyon walls. Her words cut the silence, and for the first time the men looked uneasy. They had expected helplessness, not fire. One of them sneered, spitting into the dirt. "Oh, what's it matter? She's just—" But he never finished the insult. Colton cocked his revolver, the sound slicing through the air like thunder. "Finish that sentence," Colton warned, his tone low and dangerous. "And I'll make sure it's the last one you ever say." The man swallowed hard, his bravado wilting under the weight of the cowboy's gaze. Naya stepped forward, her eyes never leaving the garments in their hands. "Throw them," she commanded. The men hesitated, but Colton's revolver never wavered, and slowly, grudgingly, one tossed her clothing into the dirt before them. The mockery drained from their faces, replaced by the cold realization that they had overstepped into a world where consequences wore spurs and steel. Naya bent to gather her things, clutching them with trembling hands, not from fear but from the surge of triumph that coursed through her. She straightened, her voice ringing like iron. "If you ever lay hands on me again, or any woman of my people, The canyon itself will not hide you from what I bring." The men shifted uneasily, none daring to speak. Colton finally lowered his revolver, though his gaze stayed fixed on them like a brand. "Best you ride out of this land," he said coldly. "You've burned your welcome." With that, he turned to Naya, giving her the space to stand in her own victory. Together, without another glance at the cowards, they returned to the horse and mounted. As the canyon opened wide before them, Naya held her reclaimed garments close, though the coat still wrapped her shoulders. She turned to Colton, her voice quieter now, stripped of fire but not of strength. "You didn't have to stand with me," she said. He met her gaze, his eyes steady. "No," he replied, "but no man should stand against you either." For the first time in many moons, Naya felt something beyond survival. She felt trust. Fragile as dawn, but real as the earth beneath her. The cowboy had not taken her power. He had helped her wield it. And as they rode side by side into the wild stretch of desert, she knew their paths, though different, were bound together by the river's current and the fire of justice that neither could carry alone.